If you like this podcast and want to support more episodes, you can donate through Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Children of the Forest to show your support for the Forest School podcast.
Without you seeing,
Okay,
and it's quite often we've been chatting about something and then I go, yeah, we started recording ages ago.
Okay, yeah.
And we
Well,
realise
I've talked about needing a wee or something.
normally,
like that.
yeah.
Embarrassing. Yeah. Excellent.
But it's just us today.
Oh, you're ruffling your papers.
Oh, is it really loud?
Shall I rustle my papers? No, it sounds very professional. There.
Russell.
Russell.
Well, I just printed out because I think we both listened to the audiobook, didn't we?
We did.
The Power of Showing Up by Daniel Siegel and Tina Bryson. And it came with...
Oh, is her name Tina Bryson or is it Bryce something or other?
There's Bryson on my handout. On my handout, like I'm at a conference.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Tina PAYNE BRYSON, but I didn't know if that was it. But yeah, so on the audiobook, which I think is very helpful, they've got a PDF, which is one of their... I think actually, is it on their other book, on their other one, one of the other ones, The Whole Brain Child, they have a bit that they're like, put this up on the fridge. And it's like...
That's what it's supposed to be, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. This is not as accessible to put on the fridge, I don't think.
No,
I think it's too much.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, it's a new book. It only came out in January, so there's not much kind of that I could find as like people chatting about it in the industry yet, which is interesting. Do you normally look up the books that we're...
Yes, I normally do, and I normally look for a review or a comment that is not entirely positive to try and get a bit more of a kind of balanced sort of I hadn't considered that or whatever. And I have to say I just started looking at reviews of this one, but all I could find is stuff on Goodreads, and it's just everyone just like gushing over it basically and saying how brilliant it was. I couldn't find any. I didn't look very hard. I only looked for a few minutes. Did you find anything?
No. I wonder if there's a certain amount of half-life with books and audiobooks. Because this is not related to books, but I quite often find on Amazon, if you try and look up the review for something you're buying, and then the review is like, posted really quickly, or you're like, looks great, haven't taken it out of the box yet. And you're like, you shouldn't have written a review.
I know, isn't it? Or
but
I gave
Audible...
this as a present to somebody, so I don't know. It's like, shut up then. Hey, can I talk very quickly? Have you ever listened to the Boring Talks podcast?
No.
It's on, I think it's on Radio 4. It's on BBC Radio anyway. It's on BBC Sounds. Look up the Boring Talks. I think you'd really like it. They're usually fairly short and they're about something completely boring sounding. But last night I listened to one on data centers and it was not at all boring. It was I was trying to go to sleep and it was really I can't sleep. I don't know about you. I'm
struggling.
At midnight I'm going outdoors and Ed is like, what are you doing? And I just need to like look at the moon. I just need to go and like listen to the noises, and I can hear all like little bank voles and stuff in the shrubbery. Anyway, that's a digression on a digression. The Boring Talk data centers. This bloke is like going and visiting these huge, secretive, weird buildings in places like Iceland and Greenland and stuff.
Yeah.
Where they have all of the servers that run the internet. So he goes to the one that Apple's cloud is.
Okay.
Like a physical place. And then he talks about how much energy they use and how big they are. And there's loads of it.
Yeah.
And loads of the podcast is just the noise he's recorded. So it's this really, really weird noise of like hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of computers making the internet or like running the cloud. And it just like, so for long stretches of the podcast, you're just listening to this like weird humming sound. It's freaky. But
weird.
Preliminary, like the amount of carbon emissions is just...
it's huge. That's one of the... That's one of the main complaints I've heard about Bitcoin.
That's what it was.
Yeah. So people farming Bitcoin uses loads of electricity, and like if you're just using solar electricity, not so bad. But most of electricity is like coal generated or natural gas electricity, and that's less than ideal.
So in short, don't write a review on Amazon unless it's meaningful, because you are literally burning carbon by writing that pointless freaking review.
I mean, it's probably this drop in the ocean, isn't it, at this point?
No. It's not important.
I just give up on everything. We're just inside. Just give up on everything.
Don't record this podcast. It's taking up internet.
Stop listening. Stop listening. You're using your phone's battery. Think about it for a second. Is this a good use of your phone's battery? You listening right now. No, not you, the listener. I'm talking to the listener now. This is not a good use of your phone's battery. No. Okay. Bye. Okay, they've all gone.
Okay, yeah, back to the book.
We should talk about this book.
Did you like the book?
Did I like the book?
It was very good, thank you. I liked it because it was really interesting and it made me read right to the end.
Oh, see, I can't even say that. I dropped off the last 20 minutes. I listened to it. I said I listened to it. So again, you have made notes and I have listened to it a little bit a while ago. But I will say that I listened to it on double speed while I was moving firewood, and periodically chainsawing. So there may be bits. Though,
because I would say one of my comments about it is it's very repetitive, which is good if you want to like dip in and out of it and you've forgotten what the previous paragraphs said, and so it will do lots and lots of recaps. It probably could have been about half the length because they reiterate the same ideas a lot. So if you're listening to it in one big go, then probably on double speed is the right speed. And I have to say, I don't normally do that, and I did do that as well. I listened to between 1.5 and 2 the whole way through, and that was fine.
But I would say that I think the book, I have listened to a few and read a few of their other books, because the two authors have written a couple of books together, and I think they are, this is the best example yet. I think they are really honing the skill of taking quite academic, it's pop science. Let's not beat around the bush. This is pop science. But making it very accessible to the right audience, which is parents. So I would say the whole brain child is somewhere in the middle of like, are you an early years practitioner? Are you a parent? Are you, quite well educated? Because a couple of this goes into some neuroscience bits. This book, I was like, I would almost give this to any parent and just go, you don't need to be, there's no kind of like, oh, well, if you've got a higher education degree in something, you'll probably follow this along. This is very academically rigorous, but very accessible.
Yeah, I would agree. We haven't really given it even a general intro. So it is a parenting book, isn't it? You could definitely listen to it. It's very relevant to our job. It's very relevant for our school. And some people I'm sure already know quite a lot about attachment. And I knew a little bit, but really wanted to know more. And I think I completely agree with you with the way that they have explained attachment theory in a very science-based. So they're not kind of being all fluffy and woolly about it. They're going literally, when you scan people's brains or you follow certain people from childhood through to adulthood, and you look at their relationships through that time, you look at their behavior, you look at all of this other stuff. This is what the data shows us. But then, as you say, kind of explaining it in a very accessible way and a very sort of relative way. So this is what will happen with this particular attachment style for a child growing into an adult. And here's what you as a parent can do to ensure that life is better for that child.
I think one of the things that I would say that I find quite interesting about this book, I wouldn't say it about their other books. Well, maybe I would. But is this might just be how I internalize books like this, but when I read these things and it talks about because one of the main bits that they talk about is positive attachment looks like this, and then they talk about all of the I can't remember the right word now. It's not like dysfunctional attachment, but it's like insecure attachment and avoidant attachment and those kind of things, those words. Gemma's looking it up now, but what I would say is I find that really helpful to have in my head when I'm talking to adults, because this stuff doesn't go away. I think there's a large a swathe of the population that might go, look, it's all great reading parenting books, but if you're not a parent, or if your kids are too old, it doesn't matter. Or if you could be like a business salesman, and reading this book would genuinely help you, because I think you would recognize things in other people. You start, because they're talking about like, a child who doesn't have a secure attachment to their primary caregiver, or for example, and they're saying that child then still has the internal stress of, you have left the room and I don't know when you're coming back and everything else, but they don't show it, and so they have all their internal signals up higher and all this stuff. And actually, if you think, okay, I'm now talking to an adult who has spent their 20 years of childhood going through that, then you're compassionate in a completely different way.
Absolutely. I think there's real crossovers between this and non-violent communication and Alfie Kohn. I think there's big overlaps, and I would agree. There's definitely something. They talk a lot about reflecting on your own childhood, don't they? Which I think for some people who have had less than ideal childhoods, this book can feel quite challenging.
It's going to be difficult.
Definitely. And one of the reviews I read did say, I read this and I cried just the whole way through as I reflected on my own life. And they really strongly recommend that even if you are going to find this difficult, that it's absolutely worthwhile reflecting back on your childhood and your relationship with your primary caregivers, and trying to work out what attachment there was going on there for you, so that then you make sense of that and you kind of form your own narrative about your own life. And people who are able to do that are able to have the mindset to then really think about what they want to provide for their children. And then you start to not only think about yourself, but then, as you say, you think about other adults, and you think about your partner and your friends and all this kind of thing. And absolutely, the overriding thing is not of any kind of judgment. It is completely compassionate. And they talk a lot about neuroplasticity, don't they? Like the Ruby Wax book, about even if you have had the worst, attachment with your caregiver, that you have the ability to make sense of that and move on past it. And and doesn't mean you're going to be a terrible parent.
Well, I think one of the Alfie Kohn's unconditional parenting was there's a large bit where he's talking about, and he's saying it's very difficult for your brain to comprehend the idea that your parents didn't do the perfect job.
Yeah.
And that is a really difficult moment of self-reflection and to kind of pick it apart. But in this book, I think it's quite early on. They're saying that in one of the studies, I can't remember which one, they're saying that the sort of average secure attachment works out to 2/3 of children. I can't remember what it is, X years old. But then if you scale that up and you go, okay, so there's probably, let's say, a few more develop a secure attachment when they meet a different caregiver, a teacher, an uncle, or whatever else. But let's roughly imagine that 1/4 of adults do not have a secure attachment in their past. That's really big. That's really big to take on board and to go, if you do have a secure attachment, because I think cards on the table, I would go back and say, I'm pretty sure I had a secure attachment with both my parents. So then you're coming from this place of like, oh my God, I'm so privileged to have had this. Look at all the ways this could have gone wrong. Look at all the things, and it's been really interesting reflecting back to just the immediate impact of me and my children, because my youngest child is 9 months old, and just as soon as I put the book down, it was like a new lens. I'm not saying I'm never one of those people that would say like, oh, let her cry it out, or like she doesn't need me. But I'm reading her face and internalizing it as like, I have a need and she's looking to see if I'm going to fulfill that need. And suddenly that onus hits me in a completely different way from like I look after my children. That's a very given thing. But when you go, that baby is looking to see if you will constantly fulfill their needs. And you just go, oh, gee, I will drop whatever. Like, I'm just going for it, And I think,
I agree, and I think that there are, as soon as you start reading it, then you start parenting even more intentionally, which is really good. And that they what I really like about it is that I started listening to it, and like you, because we both think a lot about these kind of things, right? We're all constantly thinking about child development and adults' relationship with children and how we can make that better and help children. So we're already pretty preoccupied with it, and I started listening to this book, and I started going, oh my god, shit, I need to do better and this kind of thing. And then as soon as I began to feel that, they were like, we're not saying that this means you have to be perfect. Of course you're not perfect. Of course you're going to make mistakes. If you're the kind of person who immediately feels guilty all the time, then don't do that, la 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 la. And I was like, okay, yeah, good, I'm really glad you said that, because without those statements, if you're already somebody who thinks about this stuff quite a lot, you could, as you describe, like, oh my god, I need to, this is crucially important. If I don't show up for them.
And they've got a really good bit when they talk about a thing that I think is very relatable to forest school, where they say it's not that your children will never struggle. It's not saying don't ever let them have a challenge and don't ever let them be independent in any way, and literally on the apron strings for the rest of their life. It's saying no, let them have those challenges, but make sure as much as you are able to, you are there as their safe place. And I really liked the analogy of a ship coming back from a storm and going, what that ship needs is a safe harbor. They don't need another storm. So, and that really kind of resonates with that idea of like, if your kid's done something wrong and then they come to you, or you find out about it, what they don't need is another tsunami punching them. You just need to kind of go, okay, this is the safe place you can come to, and to rebuild and try and go out on another voyage in a bit. I
also really liked the examples of kind of children being dysregulated, and then you kind of examples of, if you react in a certain way to your child. For example, I'm going to use an example that's very true in my own life. It's the end of screen time now, so rather than because you can, it's almost like when you're kind of negative with your kids, it's like you're being negative with yourself. You're kind of going, they are in this dysregulated place because of me, because my parenting skills aren't up to it, or I've done something wrong, I've done something which has put them into this state. Is how I often view it, and therefore I feel all rubbish about everything, and so then I'll kind of push negativity into the situation and fuel this kind of negative spiral. Whereas if you kind of take, I like their kind of advice on breathing, and telling yourself to calm down, telling them to calm down is never going to work, but putting it into your body first of all, and trying to take a deep breath and relax yourself and all the rest of it. And then even if the dysregulation has come from a place where their behavior is unacceptable, they've, like, as you say, that they've done something that is out of line, and now is not the time to start lecturing them about what they've done that's out of line, or start talking about like more rules or more boundaries, because that's actually not going to end the tantrum. If they're properly dysregulated, that is not the time for that. You need to let everything calm down first, before then you might talk about that later, a bit later. And I really liked that reminder, as obvious as it sounds. I thought that was really good.
Yeah, definitely. And it's laid out in a very I think they've done well as a hook to give it these 4 S's, because that does make it very, you could talk about it in a really abstract way and go, well, they need to feel this and they need, and this, but boiling it down to 4 things and going, are they feeling safe? Are they feeling seen, soothed, secure? Those things are just the one word things. You would go, oh, I'm pretty sure I get that,
Yeah.
Absolutely. And seen, I think, is the interesting one for me, because I think if you're someone who is what should we say, in the attachment theory camp, maybe, because I know I'm aware that not everybody is on board with attachment theory, and that I think I'm right in saying it's reasonably new as a way of looking at child development, but to me it seems to resonate and it seems to hold up to scrutiny. So I think you would take, if you were someone that way inclined, that you would take safe and soothed and secure as kind of, those might be obvious ones to do. You might see a distressed child and think, okay, then maybe they're not feeling safe. Maybe parents' job is to soothe, and parents' job is to make sure things are secure, that they're getting on. But seen is an interesting one in
Yeah.
that I think that is where my experience says a lot of children, if they're lacking one of these, that's the one they're lacking.
Yeah.
And when I say lacking, I mean it in terms of they haven't had as many experiences of that. They've probably, hopefully, have had quite a few experiences feeling safe. Hopefully, it's almost, I mean, I might go so far as to say that if you don't have enough experiences of feeling safe, that is very obvious in the way that behavior presents.
Yeah.
If you don't have enough experiences of feeling soothed by a caregiver, that is quite immediately obvious in the way behavior presents. Same for secure. If you're not secure in who's going to come and pick you up, who's not going to be there, whether you those three present quite quickly, and quite, like, from a teaching and a leader's point of view, you would go, I recognize that child. But a child that's lacking in experiences of being seen probably has a better chance of masking that day to day.
Yeah,
would you
definitely.
say?
Yeah, and I like the way that they describe that, because you could definitely, as a parent or an adult that's working with children, you could easily miss that as well in terms of what you're providing for the child. You might think, oh well, I'm looking after them and I'm planning for them and all the rest of that kind of thing, but actually stopping and slowing down and seeing them for who they really are is really important, but could be overlooked by an adult. So they give examples of if you're thinking about your own children, are you really seeing them for who they are, or are you projecting onto them what you want them to be, or your hopes and dreams for them? So you really want them to be academic, or you really want them to be sporty, or you project onto them, oh, they're just like me, or he takes after his dad, or he's the opposite of his sister. So you're just sort of making assumptions, and it's like a veneer of projection that you're putting onto them. Whereas if you take time to really see them and really listen to what's going on in their inner world, then the connection between you is going to be much, much better. And they give just a practical example of bedtime, just that being quite a good time for sort of open chat and being relaxed together. And in whatever bedtime routine you have with your children, even quite old children, that you have some time where you haven't got a thing that you're doing. We're not reading story now. We've done that.
We have both talked about at separate times our children defragging.
Yeah.
Just before bed, just kind of a random gargle of words and phrases that might have come up in the day, or just as they're going down, they pop up and go, "Why did that man have red shoes on?" And it's something that happened at, like, a passing thing that happened in the morning, and you're just like, okay, let's just get all this through. Let's just defrag and clean the ROM.
Yeah, rather and taking the time to do that, because they do say, and in the writing of the book, it's almost like they kind of jump ahead and go, oh, when we say this, parents are going to think blah 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 blah. So we better say something to counter that, because they're describing this bedtime sort of empty space for talking, and they immediately go, you're probably thinking, yes, of course, but it's really important that children get their sleep, like they can't stay up too late, it's really important for them. And because obviously they're thinking, oh, parents are going to be like, what, the bedtime routine is already 45 minutes long, and if I then do another however many minutes long of just chatting, then it's just not sustainable and they'll never sleep and blah blah blah. But that's one of the things I started to do as soon as I got to that bit in the book, and so I've done it a few times with my daughter, and I just kneel down by the side of her bed and just sort of stroke her head, and then we're both in silence for a bit, and then she just starts talking. It's amazing, because they do say that, they're like, you may find that you lie there in silence for a bit, and that's fine, and you won't always find that is the time for some huge revelation, or for them to express some really deep-seated worry. It might just be like you say, a chat about the man with red shoes, or a chat about their favorite TV show, but it's like a really lovely moment where they just tell them, they just say what's going on inside their inner world, and you listen to that and respond to it, which is very easy to do, but I think makes a huge difference and helps you to understand what's going on inside of them.
I think they could have, it wouldn't have fitted with the system, but I think you could reword seen as valued. And that feeling of being valued, that feeling of being valuable, that your opinions have weight, that your feelings count in some way. That's I know that a V wouldn't have worked as well, and they've got to make.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Go on.
Well, no, I was going to say that I think going back to what you were saying earlier about them almost preempt it. It's like they're having a conversation with an imaginary parent, but they can go, I know you're going to say this, or I know you're going to say, and I think that possibly is one of the techniques that I think makes when you read it, you feel like they've hit the right tone. You know, when I was saying at the top, oh, they've got this really accessible thing, and either they have sort of crafted this and tested it with different parents, or throughout their careers of writing so far, they've received enough feedback on their other books of like, you didn't mention this, and it seems like they have been reflective enough to take that on board and go, okay, well we'll write it in this style, then we'll write it in, or we'll mention this. It feels very because of how many, there are so many examples in this book. I think there's probably it probably alternates in terms of paragraph of like, here's a thing, here's an example, here's an idea, here's an example, here's an idea. There's so many that it does feel very actionable, but not in a way of giving you steps, not in a way of saying do 1, 2, do 2, do 3. It just kind of gives you so much. It's almost like being immersed, isn't it, in a I wonder if it's to do with maybe this idea of like, it takes a child, it takes a tribe, it takes a whole village to raise a child, and if you, because of the way our lives are, in general, but particularly right now with us being in lockdown, we're not able to see, we don't see as much of other people's parenting as we might have done previously, and so in lieu of being in sort of a village of huts, I'm going really, stereotypical here, but if you think of a village of huts where you would hear everything everyone said to their children, and you would see the results of those children as they grew up, and you would see who, whatever, and it's almost like, well, to replicate that, what we'll do is we'll immerse you in this sort of soup of examples and experiences, and you'll just pick it up through osmosis. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Before I forget, can I just go back to what you said about you could replace seeing your child, that S in the sequence, with the word value, and I see what you mean, but I also think that there's more to that word see than just value. So I definitely think into like seeing them honestly, so seeing their difficulties as well as their strengths, so loving them unconditionally, but having a very realistic view of, for example, what they find difficult, or where they're not developed yet. Do you know what I mean? Rather than just going, oh, you're just being silly that you don't want to go and do that thing. Actually go, oh, right, okay, no, I'm really seeing you now. I'm really tuning in, and I'm really trying to find out why. Okay, you actually don't have that skill yet, or you really don't have that ability, or you have a learning problem there. Do you know what I mean? It could be anywhere on that scale, couldn't it? To do with just needing more experience and coaching, or actually there's something a bit more.
And that kind of feeds into their. They talk quite a lot about mindsight, and that mindsight. Incredible as a phrase.
Go on.
Well,
I was going to say that the seeing part, I think, is very relevant to Forest School. And when I was listening to it, I was really thinking about the difference between being a class teacher of 30 children teaching the national curriculum at the current time, and being a Forest School leader with maybe the same class of 30 kids. Being realistic, lots of us are working with large classes, but working through a Forest School approach, I mean, that is the crux of it, really, isn't it? Through Forest School, you get to see the children. You're able to observe and tailor what you are facilitating to do with what you're really seeing those children do, and often if it isn't your class as well, so if it's a class who are coming away from their class teacher or working with their class teacher but with you're coming there from a completely fresh approach. You haven't seen them all year struggling with maths, English, science, behaviour, being able to sit on a chair. You are getting them fresh, and you're meeting them, finding out where they are, and kind of planning appropriately for that. which is, in my opinion, of course, and I'm sure in yours, and probably everyone who's listening, that is what we all should be doing, when there is no kind of top-down approach of you must all do this, you must all do that and the other. And I think the same thing with Mindsight, that all of the reflection that we do through Forest School, all of the kind of connections and relationships that we foster, and I mean, especially reflection, so talking about times that were tricky, talking about things that we enjoyed, talking about all those kind of things, both as practitioners and inviting our learners to do that, is absolutely promoting Mindsight. So being able to reflect on your mind's own workings is invaluable.
I think it's a skill that I think is very obvious, might be the wrong word. It's, to me, it seems that it's a skill that is lacking in a lot of children, is that Mindsight kind of, because I feel like it's close to empathy, but it's not exactly empathy, because I think empathy is slightly different, and Mindsight is kind of empathy plus understanding the logic of how someone's thinking. In my head, I sort of differentiate it as like empathy is completely understanding the right side, of the brain, and going, I think you are feeling angry, I think you are feeling sad, or doing whatever. And this Mindsight is kind of like, yes, you get that they are feeling angry, but also getting that idea of I trying to work out why you are angry, or what the narrative of what's making you angry.
Well, they call it deep diving and chasing the why in the book, don't they? So you're presented with some challenging behaviour, like chase the why. But isn't Mindsight also the ability to see your own mind? Isn't it like like meditation, like mindfulness? I mean, developing that kind of extra awareness of being able to view your own mind and its own workings, and being able therefore to they call it like intra-soothing, don't they? So being able to self-regulate, basically.
Well, I think one of the things that appeals to me about this, the way they've presented it, and so they've both, to my knowledge, both been quite heavily involved in mindfulness as a practice, and neurodiversity and stuff like that. And whenever I have seen resources for building up mindfulness, especially with children, I think a lot of it sits on the wanky end of the spectrum, or it sits on the like, that child that's running around and kicking the chairs. Why don't you get them to sit down quietly and do whatever? Right. So it's not going to fucking work.
So unrealistic.
But what I think is good about this is, in the same way that you might have, in fact, I've had this head teachers who have gone, I would like every member of staff to make a concerted effort to say thank you to children when they hold the door open, or to acknowledge other members of staff by saying good morning, purely in the hopes that, with no goading whatsoever, that just becomes part of the culture, and that children pick up on that idea of like, through osmosis. It's almost like, well, the grown-ups will say good morning and wave to each other, so I think what I'll do is I'll say good morning and wave to people, and then you get this culture of, that's how they've done it. And I think that's what I quite like about the way they're talking about Mindsight, is that they're just saying that, if I'm understanding it right, that by verbalizing what you're doing and what you're thinking, and saying to it, if you've got two children with you and one of them's very upset, but the other one is there while you bend down and get close and go, I think you're feeling quite angry. Would it be, I think it might be that you feel like you haven't had a fair turn, and so that you're doing this, and that all that non-violent stuff, getting into that narrative inside their head, and that other child watches it, and then they have got conflict resolution skills that they wouldn't otherwise have had. And conflict resolution, I think, is one of the main things that, I could be wrong, but I think lots of teachers would say, my job would be immediately easier if the children could do conflict resolution independently. And so this is a really amazing kind of idea of just like, this is how you could get conflict resolution nailed,
Yeah. I really liked as well, they talked a lot about connection and feeling. So they talk about children being seen, but also being felt. So feeling felt, and feeling like they're part of a we, and a connection and a joining, and how that starts with a strong attachment with a caregiver, but then extends to beyond that to other people in society and your other relationships that you might have, and then extends beyond that into nature and the planet. And I
Hmm.
love that. I love that kind of you modeling creating a strong attachment shows a child the possibilities for a feeling of connection that goes as far as the planet and nature. I thought that was really, really lovely, and thought, wow, that's, you know, a chance for us as forest school practitioners as well to do that on our small scale in our, you know, obviously carers are with their children for long periods of time and for, you know, 24 hours a day and years, and we're a blink of an eye for a lot of children who are with us. But if we can do even a sprinkling of this sort of connection between us and the children, and then demonstrate it into the, you know, extend that into nature and the wider world, I think that's a kind of key to future happiness, isn't it?
Yeah, I think as you were just saying that, it kind of clicked in my head that maybe I think internally, I think of the so because it's on my head quite a lot recently, the second forest school principle of it must need the FSA principle that says it needs to take place in a woodland or natural environment. And then it builds into what we're talking about here of it being a connection to a natural space. And I think the way my brain has framed this whole thing is that I do think of the woodland as our space.
Yeah.
But in my head, some of us are there for a bit, and some of us are there for a long time, and some of us are there all the time. And when I say some of us, I'm including flora and fauna in that group. So I kind of feel like those, and it comes with, you know, that maybe it's personification, maybe it's anthropomorphizing or whatever, but that idea of naming the trees and having, you know, oh, I know this tree, I know a bit of its history, I know a bit of how old it is, or I can see someone's coppiced that a while ago, whatever, and feeling like that person is as much of a part of the forest school community as one of the children that comes for a 6-week block. We are all in that space, some of us for 400 years, some of us for 6 weeks, but that is the framework that knits that community together. And whether I have ever, I mean, I don't think I have ever verbalized that because I've only just made it clear in my own head. But I would hope that I have subconsciously maybe put that across to the groups, you know, to the children, to say, there is, you know, everybody is a part of this. It's really difficult to choose a word, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everybody or everyone.
Yeah.
And then if you say everything, then that you get that thing of, oh, you shouldn't call the children things.
Yeah, you should really read Overstory by Brian somebody.
Have you got it next year?
I normally do, but it's not. It won the Pulitzer Prize last year. It's a novel. It's fiction.
Okay.
I was telling you about it. It's quite hefty. And it is fiction, but each of the characters in it has a special relationship with one or more trees. And so you learn quite a lot about different species of tree at the same time as reading the narrative fiction. And it is a bit like what's the one about the trees talking to each other underground?
Secret Life.
Yeah, so it's a bit like that, and one of the characters in the story ends up discovering that science. You know, she is a fictionalized version. She's a woman who does it, but it again puts another layer of that kind of understanding of trees and emotions towards trees. And since reading it, like you describe, I've got and I don't know. Oh yeah, I know what you mean about whether it is anthropomorphizing them or projecting. And I don't think it really matters if it is. You know, if you are projecting your own inner feelings, it doesn't really matter. It's just it is a feeling of connection that comes from you towards the tree as a kind of fellow being. And in the book, one of the characters is a lawyer, and he's reading through some stuff that is basically suggesting that trees are people and trees should have the same rights as people. So a lot of it is about campaigning to stop ancient woodland in America being destroyed. And so this person comes up with a really articulate argument to say that trees, the rights should extend to trees because they are a community, and because they do communicate with one another, and because they provide for one another and look after each other, all the rest of it. They should have rights just as much as a human. And it's a really interesting idea.
I think it could be one of those things that falls into a benefit, what I might call a beneficial lie. So
yeah.
even if actually, do you know what? Link it back to the left brain, right brain in the whole brain child. They acknowledge, these same authors that have written this Power of Showing Up book, they acknowledge quite early on that scans of the brain show that it reroutes to wherever makes the most sense. It isn't that all of your emotional planning happens in the right side and the left side, but it is a convenient framework.
Yeah.
And it is a convenient way to look at the world. And I think that nature connection and that community connection is another way of doing that. You know, maybe it's social manipulation, but if it's social manipulation, that means that we keep, you know, a planet that we can live on. Cool. I'm all for everybody being lied to, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
When you read this book, did you, so I think we would agree that it's a parenting book, which leaders and teachers could kind of read this book and would have a lot of things to act on, but it's primarily a book for parents. And I think one of the struggles about reading this was that they do talk about having a secure attachment and to it being a non-parenting adult. But one of the things that made me I guess maybe lament a little bit is the right word, is that even with the best will in the world to do all these things and to go, I am going to be, you know, as, I don't know what the word is, as secure and attaching post as I can be, let's say, for children. If you're working in a state system, or even you're working in a group, you know, like an independent setting like ours, if you have a child for 6 weeks, are you able to do that? And have you missed an opportunity by doing that? And okay, it brings it back to the Forest School principle of it being long term, which is obviously great. And I think this feeds massively into that, to go, the relationships and the learning are better the longer you go, not just from an academic viewpoint of like, I know that little Tommy is interested in worms. You get it's another layer of that. It's like, I know what sounds really like I'm an evil villain in a Bond character, but if you go, I know what will make him emotionally scared, right? That's a really powerful piece of knowledge. Or I know what will, you know, I know what he's going to need to tell me about. That's stuff that you can't get in a one-off drop-in session. Here you go. We rolled the toilet roll in some birdseed and you all went home. You know, long-term forest school, I think, is where this comes out. And it did make me...
Absolutely, yeah.
And I was wondering about age group for this book. And my immediate thought when I read it was like, oh, get it into the hands of every early years and preschool teacher. That is, you know, exactly where it needs to go.
I think it's all ages, actually. And a lot of books that we read, I really do strongly feel an age group. But with this one, I had the same instinct as you in terms of like, I really want to recommend it to everyone I know who's got a baby. I just think it's one of those ones where it's so much better to know the stuff than to not know it, and the sooner you know it, the better. But it's also really relevant to teenagers and to young adults as well. I think it's for every age group, and I think it's particularly relevant at the moment. And I think it's one of those, I basically like living in this hope during this pandemic that after this time of social isolation and schools closed and families just being together, one of the kind of hopes I'm pinning up there is that life won't go back to normal. It can't go back to normal, and that those of not just parents but forest school leaders or anyone else who gives a shit about kids will hopefully be able to work together to change what was before, So I really want schools to be different when kids go back. I really want them to, apart from taking a measured approach to how children begin back at school, I want school to be different. And this is the kind of book where I feel like if enough of us read it and then went, hold on a minute, this isn't right, like, you know, and demanded change, this is a nice way to kind of back yourself up. You know, if you've got a kind of gut feeling that things aren't right in the school system, this is a really nice way to kind of bring those like instincts together and go, oh, you know, it's sort of related. They talk about ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences, in this book, and if you haven't read anything about ACEs or heard about them, then definitely do a bit of reading and research about that, because it's completely fascinating. They've basically discovered that you can determine your ACE score by answering several questions, and they've actually worked out that it has an adverse effect on not just your mental health and your relationships, and your kind of success in life, but also your physical health. You know, you're more prone to heart disease, for example, if you've had a higher ACE score. And that's really relevant now. You know, we're living in a time where children are hopefully not going to be feeling awful every minute of every day, but this is going to be a weirdly traumatic time in their life for a lot of children. And I just wanted to say that I've watched a video recently which is really good by Suzanne Zeedyk, who knows all about ACEs, and she's awesome, and it's on YouTube, and it's called Coping with the Anxieties of Coronavirus, and it's her basically doing a video about it, and it's really good, and I think it overlaps with this book quite a lot, and talks about a kind of approach to working with your kids whilst they're with you the whole time and helping them to be grounded during this time. It's really good. But I know what you mean about, like, you feel like through Forest School, with the children you work with, the groups you work with, you could be making a real difference by making secure attachment with those young people where they might not have had that in other areas of their life. But it's almost like the pressure is on you even more, and the guilt, because you know it's going to end. So, you know, some of our young people, you know, we work with them for years, but they are going to leave eventually, and you think, oh, is it? And they're only with us for a handful of time per week, and you think, oh, it's not enough. But then it's better than nothing. I guess you have to look on the bright side, don't you? And think. And yeah, the interesting about ACEs is that if you have had a positive relationship with at least one adult who gave a shit about you, then your ACE score can be neutralized, basically, which is completely fascinating. So that's why it kind of works hand in hand with this. Did you have you spoken to your parents since reading this book, and have you thanked them? Because I got that, you know, when you were saying you feel like you had a secure attachment with both your parents. I've really had the urge to kind of call my mum and go, thanks, mum. And they kind of say, you know, you might think back on your own parent and go, well, they weren't perfect, but I really see where they were coming from. And it talks about thinking about their own child as well, doesn't it? And think about what their parents might have been like for them.
Yeah. And
challenges that they might have overcome to then.
Well, actually, it's interesting, isn't it? It goes back to, you disagreed with me when I was reading a book by Dan Carlin, who was talking about lots of different things through history, and he was saying that if you track back and you go like, oh, it was however many years ago we banned the beating of children in schools, and it was however many years before that we banned you know, people, cruel and unusual punishment, and how long ago was it that we stopped doing this to children, or stopped doing this to children, all this stuff that, you know, you go back through history, and, you know, how long ago have you got to get before you go, a child of 5 is being put out to work, whether or not they've got secure attachment or whatever. And he was saying that if you look back at history, you have to remember that not only is the world full of, but all of the leaders in world history most likely had a childhood that we would now deem as abusive. And if you put this on it and you go, you know, until very recently, you have to look at every, how many children were shipped out to wet nurses or to whatever, to just go, oh, whatever else, or there's a design in an American history book for how to build a wooden cot that is the right height for a goat to come and stand over, because they would have a goat that would come and literally stand with its teats over the cot, and the baby would feed from the goat. So if we're talking about secure attachment, there is a non-zero amount of people who have had a secure attachment with a goat, right? Wow. So then you go back through, I'm taking, it's kind of, you can narrowly look at it and go, what did your parents have? And did they have secure attachment? And if so, yes. If so, why? If not, why? But then you broaden that out and you go, most of world history has been run by people without secure attachment and with abusive childhoods.
Yeah.
And how does that play out? Can you blame anyone for anything now if you think about their childhoods? It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Because we're just getting too soft. All of this is just everybody getting soft. Just all namby-pamby, feelings. Nobody can see my sarcastic facial expressions. I don't mean any of that, obviously.
What did I disagree with you about on that then?
You said you didn't. Maybe I phrased it differently at the time, but I think you said that there was more of an influence on but if everybody is getting fed by a goat, it's not an issue. Or if everybody is getting beaten by the headmaster, then you just accommodate to it. Yeah, you were a real dick about it as well. You kicked me in the shins at one point, I remember, and you said, "Shut up, you."
When was this?
Oh, not that long ago. I didn't read the book that long ago. But
I don't remember any of this with me.
I don't have a secure attachment with you. That's what it is.
No.
I never know if you're gonna kick me in the shins and tell me to shut up, or
exactly. It's a disorganized attachment. I am both a threat and a source of fear, but also your significant caregiver. So you're both attached and repelled at the same time when in the woods, and you just don't know where to turn.
No, I don't ever. It's so. Do you think there's anything missing from this book that you think they mentioned that and I wish they'd said it more, or they could have talked about this topic?
No, I don't think so. I think that they, at one point, I think it's the long chapter about attachment types. They do actually say at the beginning,
you can skip it.
Quite a heavy going chapter. You can skip it, and I think that chapter is probably the most useful is particularly useful for practitioners if you don't already know the ins and outs of attachment theory. So I'd say that if you were going to read it not as a parent but as somebody who just was like, oh yeah, attachment theory, I've kind of heard of that and I know a little bit, but I'd really want to know exactly all about it, that's the chapter to listen to. I do wonder, I did find myself wanting to have a hard physical copy of the book at times, and having read The Whole Brain Child in a real copy, the illustrations were really helpful and really nice, except when they were full of weird cartoony dialogue, which you didn't like, I remember. But one of the reviews I read of this book said the same thing and said that the illustrations in the physical copy were really helpful. So I would like to have seen those. So that's the only thing I'd say was missing from the audiobook kind of thing.
I think they touched on so I think they absolutely nailed their target market of parents and parenting, and like we were saying, this is a helpful book for practitioners and just for people to understand each other in the world. But I did kind of think, as I was reading it, I was kind of getting the idea that I think if they wanted to, they could write a really good book for teachers and childcare workers.
Oh yeah.
With almost the same content. It would just need tweaking very slightly and a bit more maybe even a bit more not background, but the sort of academic sciencey stuff of it. For me personally, I would have liked it turned up a couple of notches. Um, and I think then, because when they're talking through, if you're talking to a parent, the automatic assumption is you are in a incredibly long-term relationship with the child here.
Yeah.
You know, or thinking back to your own parents, you are in that long-term relationship. So it would be interesting to see what they would write if you were saying, I am about to undertake 6 weeks with a child, or I'm going to be their class teacher for 1 year, or I'm going to be mentoring them 2 hours a week. Would they
Really,
recommend?
do you think it would be that different? I think it would be pretty similar. And you just made me remember that they give an example in the book of a pretty shit teacher. Do you remember? She's like a preschool teacher. I'm sure it's like a made up scenario, but
I would hope so.
Their preschool teacher is saying, "Right, everybody, it's break time now. Everyone stop what they're doing, go outside." And their little child is making a picture for his mum, and he doesn't stop doing it. And she's like, "Come on, you heard what I said. You need to put the pen down now. Go outside." And he's like, "Oh no, please, I just need to finish this. I need to finish this." And she's like, "No means no. You need to put the pen down and go outside." And then tries to take the paper away from him, and then it rips, and then he explodes and shouts all kinds of horrible things at her. And then he gets sent to the principal's office or whatever. It's quite American, the book, isn't it? And then the school counselor comes in and then uses the correct approach, which is like empathy, listening, remaining calm, mindset, all that kind of stuff. Oh, I could tell you were doing that picture of your mum. That must have really upset you. And talks about how the teacher should have approached it. But I kind of got the vibe that they were almost like, well, yeah, teachers will usually react wrongly. Teachers usually will tell the kids to shut up and follow instructions because there's loads of kids there and I just need to get on with my job. And it's always the school counsellor who's going to have that time to reflect. And they do say, like, what the teacher should have done is blah, 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 blah. And that would have more quickly sorted out the situation, saved her time, and had a better relationship with the child, and the child was going to be happier, and blah, blah, blah. So that kind of is, in a way, advice for teachers.
I think
there.
it
But
is,
it's
and it isn't.
that assumption that like it's going to be the school counsellor type character, or if you're a member of staff who is working with nurture groups, for example, or you're the Senko or whatever, that you're going to maybe have the opportunity and the chance to build those relationships better than if you were. Oh, and also there's another reference to a teacher where they're saying that they're speaking at a conference and the teacher says, if what you say is true, I'm going to have to completely put my whole discipline strategy in the bin. And she's using the traffic light thing that basically all bloody schools use, with the names on the closed pegs, and then moving from red, amber, green, and they all start on green. And if they're bad, they get to amber, and if they're really bad, they've gone red, and their parents are called. But
Gemma, some schools have made it nice. Sometimes it's a rainbow and a storm cloud. Yeah. That can't be damaging, can it?
Then she describes how it's, and then I think it's Tina Pace, whatever her name is, PAYNE BRYSON, who says to her, "So is this working though? Are you seeing the same kids being put onto red?" She's like, "Yep, it's the same kids every time being put onto red, so much so that their names have been rubbed off the name cards." And she's like, "Well, yeah, no, it clearly isn't working then, because you're not chasing the why. You're not finding out why this behavior is happening."
And she says, that child is repeatedly doing behavior that they know is getting them negative consequences. So it's not that they aren't doing it, it's that they can't. If you are doing something that results in negative consequences, but you keep doing it, there's a good chance that it's not something that's in your control. You don't willingly sign yourself up to punishment, basically.
Yeah, completely. And you're going to be embarrassed in front of your peers, you're going to get in trouble with your parents, and the teacher is going to be annoyed with you. You absolutely don't want that to happen. So you can't behave in the way that your teacher is expecting you to. But I found myself, as I was listening to that, going, oh my God, if I was teaching again, and teaching in a secondary school where you only have them for maximum of an hour a day, and you're expected to follow like the school's discipline procedures, how the heck you then begin to chase the why, which you obviously want to, like, you do the job because you care about the kids. And I remember the children that are sparky and a little bit different and find it harder for whatever reason to follow the rules in inverted commas. They're the kids that I really remember and I'm really, really fond of. And they're the kids you instinctively want to help and be there for. But you haven't bloody got time. And the whole bloody structure of it is so wrong. It's
Well,
so
that's where that's kind of the bit that's kind of where I think I was going, where this book is written for parents and so assumes a lot of one-to-one or small, maybe 1 to 2, 1 to 3, maybe if you've got 3 kids, but it assumes a lot of downtime, a lot of free time, a lot of unstructured time. And I think that is what, again, I think this is very similar to you and very similar to a lot of people, of that's why I stopped teaching, because this was what I wanted to do. And let's be clear, right? I have issues with the school system, but my issue is that I think the majority of teachers want to do this, and the school system and the system prevents them from doing it. I have no issue with individual granted there are teachers that are below par, but that's not the majority of teachers. The majority of teachers want to do this, want to be a secure attachment figure, want to have these beneficial relationships, but because they are being squeezed with bigger class sizes and more academic testing and all those things, then they aren't in that system able to achieve these things. And then that's where I think books like this can come under scrutiny, is because because they're only writing this for parents. Someone like us will recommend this to a teacher and they will immediately just go, well, I won't have time for any of that, and throw it back. Which is where I wonder if these authors did have in their minds teachers specifically, would they be able to write something that could get accepted into state education? Do you know where I'm saying with that?
Yeah, something's going to influence policy, something that is directed at policymakers, and they did more training in schools and then raised awareness so that teachers were able to kind of fight against the system.
Just sit down with some senior politicians and break down their attachment.
Yeah. Give them some therapy.
We've gone over the hour mark, so I think that's a good time to wrap things up. I would just recommend, I don't think there's anybody that I wouldn't recommend this book to. I think as long as you keep in your head that it's primarily written for parents. So I think if you are a teacher or a forest school leader, read it, maybe apply it with your own families. But there will only be bits that you can take away to your practice.
I don't know. I disagree. I think the stuff on attachment, as you described, is relevant to one's interactions with any human being. So having even if you don't agree with it, even if you think, well, that's maybe part of the picture, attachment theory, it's like another arrow in your quiver, isn't it?
Quiver in the arrow. But I think one of the things is that it can come you can read something like this, and if you are a teacher or a leader, so like our setting is quite a play-based setting. We're both, very interested in play working, and we believe in those principles. So I think you could end up reading something like this and then feeling like you have to force some interactions, because you go, I've got to make sure they feel seen. I've got to make sure they feel soothed. I've got to and you could actually overstep the mark in order of being like, I've got to make sure they've got attachment. Whereas the kids are going, do you know what? Do one. We're playing swords.
Yeah, that's true point. Talking of our setting being a play-based setting, how are you finding the lack of that kind of play in your life? I mean, you have 2 young children, but it's a different vibe, like they're different ages. Do you know what I mean? Because yesterday, so I've got 3 children in my house currently, and they're all like playing together with themselves, and I'm like, okay, you guys good? You're fine? I'm kind of like checking in with them the whole time, making sure I'm not getting too involved in something that I'm involved with, just keeping an ear out in case they need me. And they're a bit older, so they're age between 5 and 9, and I'm just feeling a little bit left out. Basically like, can I play? And they're like, oh, okay. And then yesterday I ended up dressing up as an old hag from probably somewhere in Eastern Europe. I'm not really sure. The accent was, unidentifiable. Running the cafe mud kitchen in my garden.
Sorry, what did she sound like?
She sounded a little bit like King Julian from Madagascar.
No, I'm gonna need an example.
Oh, I can't do it now. I might do it in a minute. Can I do it?
She was running the cafe, was she?
Anyway, they came to my cafe and you start the food, start it. No, you start it. Put this in. Yes, it's nice, gives flavor. Yes, sounded like that. But more croaky and hunchbacked, and she limped, and she was like dolloping out slop to these rich people. They were the rich people, and splashing them with like mud pies and stuff, and they basically kept giving me like the signal that they wanted to end the game. I was like, no, okay, now you can invite me to your house if you want to. So you go to your house, you can invite me. And they basically took pity on me and then invited me to their castle, luckily, and that was all fine. But yeah, I'm really, really missing playing. They all came out all at once. Those poor children made me traumatized. I'm like, oh my god.
Well, I had
doing.
I think I realised my play types. I went into the woods to cut some firewood and do some kind of maintenance, and well, I'm going to end the podcast on a real bummer now. So I live sort of 15 minutes away from the woods, and I spent about 4 or 5 hours in the woods, and then on my 15-minute drive home, just teared the whole way, just cried, and I couldn't work out what it was about, and I think it was to do with like the sort of futility of like, normally when I'm in the woods, I'm building a new thing and my excitement is all based around like, I cannot wait to see them play with this thing. Yeah. I cannot wait to see them play with this space. And that almost, they say that some people, they gain weight because they have someone who shows them love through food.
Yes.
And I realized that the way I show love to the groups is to go, I've built this thing for you. I've built this place. I've built
a thing.
And so without just the futility of like, well, I'll just leave it then. Yeah. It's just, and that was very, I didn't feel seen, Gemma. I didn't feel seen. But it will, we've got enough firewood until 2045.
Amazing.
There's no trees left. So I'm hoping that the quarantine lasts a bit longer because they need to grow and just repopulate. At the moment, it's just a big car park. But yeah, it's I think there's lots of connections going on out there digitally, and that will keep us going. And we will get back out, whether we just get to miss the fun summer and we get to do a winter and then another winter.
Don't even.
Winter all the time. Winter all the time.
Me like forcing them to play my weird role play games, but they will be like, yeah, I kind of had a strong attachment with my mother, except that she was insane. And
I really hope that you get stuck in this character. Like, if it went long enough that you just came back to the woods and couldn't break it.
I can send you a picture of her if you want.
I would really enjoy it.
I took a picture of her, but it did actually look a bit like the picture of us. It's the same character, I think, as the first time we played like camouflage hide and seek, and we took bits of like, and then there's a picture of us. I've got it around my face. It's a bit like that.
Okay, it's a good look. It's a solid look.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll leave it there then.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Bye. Cheers, mate. Bye.
If you like this podcast and want to support more episodes, you can donate through Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Children of the Forest to show your support for the Forest School podcast.